I stood motionless in the driveway, watching my sister Jennifer and her boyfriend Ryan unload their belongings from a rented moving truck. They laughed and joked, completely at ease, as they carried boxes into what they believed was their new home. What they didn't know was that the keys in Jennifer's pocket wouldn't work anymore, and the deed they thought guaranteed their ownership had been legally transferred to my name 3 days ago. I could have stopped them at any moment, explained the situation, but something kept me rooted to the spot, observing from a distance as they built castles in the sand. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The modest 2-bedroom craftsman with its weathered blue paint and white trim had belonged to our grandparents. The property that Jennifer had convinced our ailing grandmother to sign over to her through manipulation and false promises. The home where I'd spent every summer of my childhood, now legally mine after months of careful documentation and legal maneuvering to correct a profound injustice. I watched as Ryan struggled with their oversized leather couch, the one Jennifer C. had bragged about financing at only 26% interest, and felt a complicated mix of vindication and sadness. Soon they would discover that the locks had been changed. Soon they would learn that the deed they'd waved in my face at Grandma's funeral had been invalidated. Soon they would understand that actions have consequences. I checked my watch. Exactly 4:15 p.m. My attorney would be arriving in 15 minutes with the sheriff's deputy. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The journey that led me to this moment began 8 months ago, though the seeds were planted much earlier in my relationship with Jennifer. Growing up 3 years apart, we were less like sisters and more like opposing forces of nature. While I focused on education and building a stable future, Jennifer cultivated a perfect image and the social connections to maintain it. My parents never hid their preference for her effortless charm over my determined responsibility. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became the soundtrack of my adolescence, playing on repeat through high school, college, and into adulthood. I still remember the day our grandmother called me, her voice fragile but determined. It was a Tuesday morning in September, the kind of crisp autumn day that makes you believe anything is possible. I was in my office on the 28th floor of the Westbrook Financial Building, reviewing client portfolios and planning my week, when her name appeared on my phone screen. "Olivia," she said, skipping her usual pleasantries. "I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come by after work today?" There was an unusual urgency in her normally gentle voice that immediately set alarm bells ringing. I rearranged my afternoon meetings and drove straight to Maplewood, the quaint suburban neighborhood where she'd lived for the past 50 years. Grandma Eleanor was waiting on her porch swing, a woolen cardigan wrapped around her shoulders despite the mild weather. At 83, she still maintained the dignified posture and clear-eyed gaze that had characterized her throughout my life, though recent years had added a fragility that worried me. She patted the space beside her, and I joined her, the familiar creak of the swing instantly transporting me back to childhood summers. "Jennifer came by yesterday," she began without preamble. "She brought all these papers, talking about helping me manage my affairs since I'm getting on in years." The slight tremor in her hands belied the steadiness in her voice. "She says I should sign the house over to her now, to avoid complications later, that it would be easier for everyone." I fought to keep my expression neutral despite the immediate tightening in my chest. "What did you tell her, Grandma?" I said I needed to think about it, that I'd talk to my lawyer first. She reached for my hand, her skin cool and paper-thin against mine. But she was very persistent, Olivia. Said it was the sensible thing, that she and Ryan need a place to start their life together, that you're already successful with your fancy job and downtown condo. Her eyes, still sharp despite the years, searched my face. She mentioned you agreed this was best, that you were too busy to be bothered with an old house anyway. The familiar hollow feeling opened in my stomach. The one that always appeared when Jennifer had twisted reality to serve her purposes. "That's not true, Grandma. Jennifer never discussed this with me." Grandma nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion. "I thought as much. Your sister has always had a creative relationship with the truth." She sighed, gazing out at the maple tree that had given the neighborhood its name, its leaves beginning their transformation into brilliant orange. "This house isn't just property, Olivia. It's 50 years of memories with your grandfather. It's where your father took his first steps, where you girls spent your summers learning to bake cookies and catch fireflies." Her voice caught slightly. "I always intended to leave it to both of you, to share equally." I squeezed her hand gently. "Don't worry about Jennifer. I'll handle this." But handling Jennifer had never been simple. When I confronted her that evening, calling her cell phone from Grandma's kitchen while Eleanor rested upstairs, her response was predictably defensive. "Of course I didn't say you explicitly agreed," she snapped, her voice sharp with irritation. "I said you wouldn't mind because you're established already. Don't be so dramatic, Olivia. You know Grandma can't maintain that house anymore, and Ryan and I need to get out of our apartment. The landlord's raising the rent again, and we can't afford to buy in this market." "That's not the point, Jen," I replied, struggling to keep my voice level. "You tried to manipulate Grandma into signing over her home based on false pretenses. That's not okay." "God, you're always so self-righteous," she huffed. "Not everyone has their life perfectly arranged like you do. Some of us are still trying to figure things out, and a little family support wouldn't kill you." "Family support doesn't mean lying to our grandmother to get her house." "Whatever. I'm done with this conversation. Tell Grandma I'll come by this weekend with the papers from my lawyer." The call ended abruptly, leaving me staring at my phone in the warm yellow light of Grandma's kitchen, surrounded by the copper-bottomed pots and hand-embroidered dish towels that had been fixtures of my childhood. That night, I stayed in my old room at Grandma's house, the one Jennifer and I had shared during summer visits, with its faded floral wallpaper and twin beds covered in patchwork quilts Grandma had made before we were born. I lay awake for hours, thinking about Jennifer's determination to claim the house and what it represented. This wasn't just about property. It was about a lifetime of Jennifer getting her way, of her needs and wants taking precedence over everyone else's. By morning, I had made a decision. I would protect Grandma and her home, even if it meant going up against my only sister. I called into work, requesting several days of personal leave, and began to research elder law specialists in the area. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal consultations, documentation, and difficult conversations. I learned that Grandma had already signed some preliminary papers Jennifer had brought, though nothing had been officially filed or recorded. The lawyer I retained, Marcus Chen, was concerned by the circumstances and suggested we document Grandma's mental capacity immediately to establish that she understood her assets and intentions. "Your grandmother is still very sharp," Marcus assured me after meeting with her. "But if your sister pursues this, she could try to claim Eleanor was confused or under duress. We need to create a proper estate plan that reflects her true wishes and protects her from undue influence." Throughout October, while the leaves fell and the days grew shorter, we worked to establish a comprehensive plan for Grandma's care and assets. Eleanor was clear that she wanted the house to eventually pass to both Jennifer and me equally, but she was increasingly concerned about Jennifer's financial instability and Ryan's unclear involvement in their affairs. "I love your sister," Grandma confided as we shared tea one rainy afternoon. "But I've watched her bounce from one crisis to another since she was 16. I'm worried about what would happen to this place if something were to go wrong with Ryan, or if they couldn't afford the taxes and maintenance." I nodded, understanding her concerns without needing to voice my own observations about Jennifer's pattern of impulsive decisions and financial mismanagement. The credit card debt she'd accumulated in college, the car she'd financed at an exorbitant interest rate, the string of jobs abandoned because bosses were unreasonable, or co-workers impossible to deal with. We decided, with Marcus's guidance, to establish a living trust with both Jennifer and me as eventual beneficiaries, but with safeguards in place to ensure the property couldn't be sold without mutual agreement and that Grandma could remain in her home as long as she wished. It was a sensible, fair arrangement that protected everyone's interests. Jennifer, predictably, did not see it that way. When she discovered what we'd done, arriving one Sunday afternoon in November with her own lawyer's papers only to be presented with the new trust documentation, her reaction was explosive. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "You always do this!" she shouted, pacing Grandma's living room while Ryan sat uncomfortably on the edge of the sofa, examining his fingernails. "You always have to control everything. Always have to prove you're smarter, more responsible, better, at everything." "This isn't about me," I tried to explain, keeping my voice level despite the familiar frustration building. "This is about protecting Grandma and making sure. It's about you not wanting me to have anything good." Jennifer interrupted, her face flushed with anger. "God forbid your little sister finally gets a break, finally has a chance at stability. You just can't stand to see me succeed, can you?" Grandma, who had been silently watching this exchange from her armchair, finally spoke. "Jennifer Marie, that's enough." Her voice was quiet but carried the unmistakable authority that had stopped many arguments in their tracks when we were children. "This house will eventually belong to both of you, as it always should. This arrangement ensures that no one can make hasty decisions that might be regretted later." Jennifer turned to her, the anger in her expression softening to wounded betrayal. "But Grandma, you promised me. Ryan and I have already started planning our move. We gave notice at our apartment." Her voice took on the plaintive quality that had convinced our parents to extend curfews and increase allowances throughout our youth. "We need this, Grandma. Olivia doesn't. She has everything figured out already." I watched Grandma's face, saw the momentary wavering, the lifetime habit of smoothing things over, making peace, ensuring Jennifer's happiness. For a terrifying moment, I thought she might capitulate, might undo the protections we'd so carefully put in place. But then she straightened in her chair, her expression resolute. "I'm sorry if you misunderstood, dear. But this decision is final. The trust is fair to both of you and ensures this home stays in the family as your grandfather would have wanted." The rest of the visit was tense and abbreviated. Jennifer refused to look at me as she and Ryan prepared to leave, addressing her terse goodbye only to Grandma. As they walked to their car, I watched through the living room window as Jennifer gestured animatedly, clearly continuing the argument with new vigor now that she was out of Grandma's presence. Ryan nodded periodically, his expression unreadable from a distance. "She'll come around," Grandma said quietly beside me, though her tone lacked conviction. "Jennifer has always needed time to accept when things don't go her way." I wasn't so sure. The look Jennifer had given me before walking out the door had contained something beyond her usual temporary anger, something colder and more determined. I'd seen that look only once before, when we were teenagers and I'd caught her taking money from our mother's purse. It was the look of someone who had no intention of accepting defeat. The weeks passed, autumn chill giving way to winter's first, frosts. Jennifer's communication was minimal and frigid when it occurred at all. Terse responses to family group texts pointed absence from Sunday dinners at our parents' home. I tried to reach out several times, suggesting coffee or lunch to clear the air, but my overtures were met with excuses or outright silence. Meanwhile, I continued to visit Grandma regularly, helping with household tasks that had become more challenging as winter set in. I cleared gutters, replaced burnt-out light bulbs, and arranged for a service to handle snow removal from her driveway and walkways. We spent quiet evenings playing gin rummy or watching British mystery shows, her Longtime favorite. If she was troubled by Jennifer's absence, she mentioned it only obliquely, with occasional wistful comments about when the whole family was together. December arrived with holiday preparations and the usual end-of-year rush at work. I was deeply involved in a complex portfolio restructuring for several key clients, requiring late nights and weekend hours at the office. It was during this hectic period, when my attention was necessarily divided, that everything changed. I received a call from Mrs. Abernathy, Grandma's next-door neighbor and friend of 30 years, on a Wednesday afternoon while I was between client meetings. "Olivia, dear, I'm so sorry to bother you at work, but I'm a bit concerned," she began, her normally cheerful voice tinged with worry. "Your grandmother took a fall this morning bringing in her newspaper. Nothing broken, thank goodness. But the paramedics thought she should go to the hospital for some tests, just to be safe. I'm following the ambulance there now." My heart hammered as I thanked her, promised to meet them at the hospital, and quickly rearranged my schedule. The drive to Westlake Medical Center was a blur of worst-case scenarios and self-recrimination. Should I have insisted on installing those grab bars in the bathroom earlier? Should we have arranged for daily check-ins given the icy conditions lately? Grandma was alert and embarrassed about the fuss when I arrived, insisting it was just a silly slip, and she was perfectly fine. The doctors, however, recommended keeping her overnight for observation, concerned about a potential minor concussion, and wanting to run several cardiac tests given her age and the sudden fall. "This is ridiculous," she protested as I helped adjust her hospital pillows. "I need to get home and finish addressing my Christmas cards." "The Christmas cards can wait, Grandma," I assured her, trying to mask my concern with light humor. "Just think of this as a spa retreat with terrible food and unflattering robes." She smiled reluctantly, then winced as she shifted position. "Well, I suppose one night won't hurt. But you'll need to stop by the house and make sure the back door is locked. I can't remember if I secured it in all the commotion." I promised to check on the house, kissed her forehead, and left only when visiting hours ended, with assurances from the nursing staff that they would call immediately if anything changed overnight. The house was dark and unusually silent when I arrived. I'd always loved Grandma's home after sunset, the way lamplight created warm pools in each room, the faint scent of cinnamon and cloves that lingered year-round, the comforting creaks of the old wooden floors. Now, with Grandma absent, it felt vulnerable somehow, a sensation I tried to dismiss as I moved through each room, checking windows and doors. Everything was secure, nothing out of place except for the small scatter of Christmas cards on the dining table, half addressed in Grandma's elegant, if slightly wavering, handwriting. I sat for a moment in her favorite armchair, allowing myself to feel the full weight of worry I'd been holding at bay in her presence. What if this fall was just the beginning? What if she couldn't safely live alone anymore? The thought of Grandma, anywhere but in this house she loved, seemed wrong. Yet I couldn't ignore the realities of aging and increasing frailty. My phone chimed with an incoming text, startling me from these thoughts. It was from Jennifer, the first direct communication, in weeks. "Heard about Grandma. Mom told me, is she okay?" I blinked at the screen, surprised by this olive branch, small though it was. I typed back quickly, "She's staying overnight at Westlake Medical for observation, but doctors think she'll be fine. Just precautionary." 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "Good. Tell her I'll visit tomorrow. I've been thinking about things. Maybe we should talk soon." Something in her phrasing struck me as odd. An uncharacteristic conciliation from Jennifer, who typically maintained grudges with impressive dedication. Still, if Grandma's fall had prompted a reevaluation of priorities, that could only be positive. "That would be good," I replied. "Let me know when you're free." I finished securing the house and drove home to my downtown condo, mind-churning. With concerns about Grandma and tentative hope about reconciliation with Jennifer, I fell into an exhausted sleep around midnight, only to be awakened at 6 a.m. by another call from the hospital. Grandma's tests had revealed some cardiac irregularities that required additional monitoring. She would need to stay at least one more day. I visited before work, finding her frustrated but resigned to the extended stay. "These doctors are being absurdly cautious," she insisted, though the dark circles under her eyes suggested the fall had taken more out of her than she wanted to admit. "But I suppose it gives me a chance to catch up on my reading." She patted the mystery novel I'd brought from her bedside table the previous evening. "Jennifer mentioned she might visit you today," I told her, watching her face brighten at this news. "I think she's ready to move past the disagreement about the house." "Oh, that would be wonderful," Grandma said, her entire demeanor lifting. "Family rifts are such a waste of precious time." I left for work feeling lighter, the prospect of family harmony combining with the doctor's cautious optimism about Grandma's condition to ease my worries. The day passed in a flurry of year-end client reviews and holiday office festivities. It wasn't until late afternoon that I checked my phone and saw several missed calls from Mrs. Abernathy, followed by a text. "Please call me when you can. Something strange is happening at your grandmother's house." A cold unease settled in my stomach as I stepped away from the office holiday party to return her call. "Olivia, I'm sorry to bother you again," Mrs. Abernathy began, her voice hushed as if she feared being overheard. "But there's a moving truck in your grandmother's driveway, and your sister and her boyfriend are loading furniture into it." "What?" I struggled to make sense of this information. "Are you sure? Maybe they're just picking up some of their stored belongings." Jennifer had kept several boxes of personal items in Grandma's basement since her last apartment downsizing. "No, dear. They're taking the dining room set right now. The big china cabinet that was your grandfather's family piece." There was no mistaking the alarm in her voice. "I asked your sister if Eleanor knew about this, and she said everything was arranged, that Eleanor had asked them to update some of the furniture while she was in the hospital. But it doesn't seem right. Olivia, they're taking so much." My mind raced, trying to find an innocent explanation but finding none. "I'll be there as soon as I can, Mrs. Abernathy. Thank you for calling." The drive to Maplewood took an excruciating 45 minutes in rush hour traffic. By the time I pulled onto Grandma's street, the moving truck was gone, but Jennifer's car remained in the driveway. The front door was unlocked when I tried it, unusual for Grandma's house at any time. Inside, the disruption was immediately evident. The dining room stood empty of the antique mahogany set that had hosted 50 years of family holidays. The living room was missing the grandfather clock, the oriental rug, and several smaller pieces. Family photos had been removed from walls, leaving ghostly rectangles on the faded wallpaper. I found Jennifer in Grandma's bedroom, wrapping the antique silver hairbrush and mirror set from the dresser in bubble wrap. "What the hell are you doing?" My voice was barely recognizable, strained with shock and anger. Jennifer started slightly but recovered quickly, continuing to wrap the silver piece with deliberate care. "What does it look like?" "I'm moving some things to storage for safekeeping while Grandma recovers." "Safekeeping?" I repeated incredulously, gesturing toward the half-empty room. "You're stripping the house, Jen. The dining set? Grandpa's clock. These aren't things Grandma asked you to update or store." She set down the wrapped hairbrush, turning to face me with practiced innocence. "Grandma and I have been discussing redecorating for months. She thinks it's time for a refresh, especially if she's going to need modifications for safety. The old furniture is too heavy, too many sharp corners." She waved a dismissive hand. "It's all going to a temperature-controlled storage unit. Nothing's being sold." The deliberate lie was so smoothly delivered that for a split second, I almost questioned my own certainty. But then I remembered the trust documents, the legal protections we'd put in place specifically to prevent this type of unilateral action. "Stop lying, Jennifer. Grandma never discussed redecorating with you." And even if she had, the house and its contents are in a trust now. You can't just take things without agreement from both trustees. Something shifted in her expression then, the mask of innocence giving way to a harder, more calculating look. Actually, that's where you're wrong. The trust was never finalized. What are you talking about? I was there when Grandma signed the documents with Marcus. Jennifer smiled, a small, triumphant curl of her lips. Those were preliminary papers. The final trust documents required filing with the county records office, which never happened because Grandma changed her mind. She reached into her purse and withdrew a folded document. This is a deed transfer, signed by Grandma 3 weeks ago, transferring ownership of the house directly to me. It's already been properly recorded. I stared at the document she held out, unable to process what I was seeing. That's impossible. Grandma wouldn't do that without telling me. She knew you'd try to talk her out of it, make her feel guilty. She wanted me and Ryan to have a fresh start, wanted to see us settled while she's still alive to enjoy it. Jennifer's voice took on the reasonable, slightly condescending tone she'd perfected over years of justifying questionable actions. She's tired of the responsibility, Olivia. The fall proves she needs something simpler, maybe assisted living, or a retirement community. This way, the house stays in the family, and she doesn't have to worry about maintenance anymore. I felt physically ill, the room seeming to tilt slightly as I struggled to reconcile this with what I knew of Grandma's wishes. I don't believe you. Grandma would never go behind my back like this, not after everything we discussed. Believe what you want, Jennifer shrugged, returning to her packing. The deed is filed and legal. Ryan and I will be moving in next week. Once we've updated a few things, Grandma's already agreed to let us convert the downstairs study into a home office for Ryan's new remote job. My head was spinning, but one thought crystallized through the confusion. I needed to speak to Grandma immediately. Without another word to Jennifer, I turned and left the bedroom, then the house, the front door slamming behind me with a finality that echoed my racing heart. At the hospital, I found Grandma dozing, a half-eaten dinner tray pushed to the side of her adjustable bed. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile under the harsh fluorescent lighting. I hesitated to wake her, but the urgency of the situation overrode my reluctance. Grandma? I touched her hand gently. It's Olivia. Her eyes fluttered open, momentary confusion giving way to recognition and a warm smile. Olivia, dear, what a nice surprise. Visiting hours must be almost over. I need to ask you something important, I said, pulling a chair close to her bedside. Did you sign papers for Jennifer recently? About the house? Grandma's smile faded, replaced by a worried frown. No, nothing like that. Not since we set up the trust with Marcus. She studied my face more closely. What's happened? Relief flooded through me, followed immediately by cold anger. Jennifer showed me a deed transfer today, claiming you signed the house over to her 3 weeks ago. She and Ryan are moving in your furniture, claiming you approved everything. What? Grandma struggled to sit up straighter, wincing at the movement. That's absolutely not true. I would never... She stopped abruptly, eyes widening with a sudden realization. Wait. She did bring some papers about 3 weeks ago. Said they were insurance forms I needed to update since I was turning 84. I was distracted with the Christmas card list. I didn't read them carefully. Her voice quavered. Oh, Olivia, I'm so sorry. I should have been more careful. The mixture of shock and shame on her face broke my heart. I took her hand, squeezing gently. This isn't your fault, Grandma. Jennifer deliberately misled you. That's fraud, and we'll fix it. I can't believe she would do this, Grandma whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. My own granddaughter. I wanted to comfort her, to find words that would soften this betrayal, but before I could respond, A nurse appeared in the doorway, apologetically announcing the end of visiting hours. Promising to return in the morning, I kissed Grandma's forehead and left, my mind already racing with next steps. Outside the hospital, I called Marcus Chen despite the late hour, leaving a detailed voicemail about the situation. Then I drove straight to the county records office, arriving 15 minutes before their 8 p.m. closing time. The clerk was reluctant to help at first, clearly eager to end her day, but something in my expression must have conveyed the urgency of my request. The deed transfer was indeed on file, dated exactly 3 weeks earlier, with what appeared to be Grandma's signature and a notary seal from a mobile notary I didn't recognize. I took photos of everything with my phone, my hands shaking slightly with a combination of anger and determination. That night was the longest of my life, a sleepless vigil of research and planning. I scoured legal websites, consulted online, forums about fraudulent property transfers, and compiled a detailed timeline of events. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan and a renewed sense of purpose that overshadowed my exhaustion. Marcus called back at 7:30 a.m., his voice grim after listening to my voicemail. "This is serious, Olivia. If your grandmother confirms she was misled about what she was signing, we have grounds to challenge the deed transfer as fraudulent, but we need to move quickly." "How quickly?" I asked, already mentally rearranging my work schedule. "Today, if possible. Property fraud cases become more complicated the longer the new owner has possession. And if your sister moves in and establishes residency, it could become a lengthy eviction process even after we invalidate the fraudulent deed." By 9 a.m., I was back at the hospital with Marcus, where Grandma gave a sworn statement about the circumstances of her signature, affirming she had never intended to transfer the house to Jennifer and had been told she was signing updated insurance forms. Her normally gentle demeanor was shadowed by hurt and anger, but her resolve was clear. "I want this fixed," she told Marcus firmly, "and I want safeguards in place to ensure nothing like this can happen again." The next 72 hours were a whirlwind of legal filings, emergency court hearings, and tense phone calls. Jennifer, confronted with Grandma's statement and the rapidly mounting legal response, alternated between tearful claims of misunderstanding and venomous accusations that I was turning Grandma against her. Ryan, when I finally spoke to him directly, seemed genuinely shocked by the situation, suggesting he may not have been fully aware of Jennifer's methods. The judge, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s, took one look at the evidence and granted a temporary stay on the deed transfer, effectively freezing any legal claim Jennifer had to the property until a full hearing could be conducted. More significantly, she issued an order preventing Jennifer from removing any additional items from the house or taking up residence there. While these legal proceedings unfolded, Grandma was discharged from the hospital with a clean bill of health but strict instructions to avoid stress, an ironic prescription given the circumstances. She opted to stay with our parents temporarily, partly for the additional support during her recovery, and partly to avoid the emotional strain of returning to a home that had been partially ransacked by her own granddaughter. "I can't bear to see it yet," she confessed when I suggested retrieving some of her personal items. "Not until everything's sorted out legally, and I know it's really still mine." The recovery of Grandma's furniture proved surprisingly straightforward. Despite Jennifer's claims about a temperature-controlled storage unit, most items were found in the garage of Ryan's cousin's house in a neighboring suburb, hastily covered with moving blankets. The most valuable pieces, the grandfather clock, the silver sets, and several antique figurines, had already been listed for sale on various online marketplaces. Each recovered item felt like a small victory, a piece of Grandma's life and history rescued from Jennifer's betrayal. But the legal process to fully invalidate the fraudulent deed would take time, even with the compelling evidence we had gathered. In the interim, Marcus suggested a decisive step to prevent further attempts at appropriation. "We should change the locks immediately," he advised during a strategy meeting in his office. The judge's order prevents them from moving in or removing items, but physical security would provide additional protection. I agreed without hesitation, arranging for a locksmith to replace every external lock on the house that same afternoon. Standing in Grandma's kitchen as the locksmith finished with the back door, I felt a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. This house that had always represented family warmth and security now required literal locks to protect it from family itself. As January arrived with bitter cold and early sunsets, the legal proceedings continued methodically. The judge, convinced by the evidence of deliberate fraud, invalidated the deed transfer and ordered a full accounting of all items removed from the house. But the most significant development came from an unexpected quarter. Ryan called me on a Tuesday evening, his voice low and hesitant. "I need to talk to you about Jennifer and the house situation. Not over the phone. Can we meet somewhere?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop halfway between our respective workplaces the following afternoon. I arrived first, selecting a table, in the back corner where our conversation wouldn't be easily overheard. Ryan appeared precisely at the agreed time, looking uncomfortable in his business casual attire, as if the collar of his button-down shirt was slightly too tight. "Thanks for meeting me," he began awkwardly after ordering a black coffee. "I want you to know I had no idea about the fraud with your grandmother's signature. Jennifer told me Eleanor had changed her mind about the trust and wanted to give us the house directly." I studied his face, looking for signs of deception, but finding only genuine distress. "When did you discover the truth?" "When the sheriff delivered the court order." He stared into his coffee cup, avoiding my gaze. "I confronted Jennifer that night, and she finally admitted everything. How she'd tricked your grandmother. How she'd been planning this for months." He looked up then, his expression pained. "We've been together for 3 years, and I thought I knew her. But this is something I can't accept or be part of." "What are you saying exactly?" "I'm saying Jennifer and I are done?" "I'm saying I have information that might help make this legal process move faster." He reached into his messenger bag and withdrew a folder. "These are emails and text messages where Jennifer discussed her plans to get the house. Some date back to before your grandmother's fall. He hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with what he was about to share. "She was monitoring your grandmother's prescription schedule, waiting for a day when she'd taken pain medication for her arthritis. That's when she brought the fraudulent papers." The calculated nature of the deception was breathtaking in its cruelty. I accepted the folder with a numb hand, unable to immediately formulate a response that wouldn't consist entirely of anger. "Why are you giving me this?" I finally asked. Ryan sighed deeply, running a hand through his hair. "Because it's the right thing to do. Because your grandmother deserves justice. And honestly, because I need to make some kind of amends for my part in this, even if it was unwitting." He paused, seeming to weigh his next words carefully. "There's one more thing you should know. Jennifer's planning to move into the house anyway, despite the court order. She has a copy of the old key, made before you changed the locks. She's convinced that if she establishes residency, it will complicate the legal process enough that you'll eventually settle just to be done with it." "When?" I demanded, my voice sharper than intended. "This weekend, Saturday morning. She thinks you'll be at work and your grandmother will be at your parents' place." He stood, leaving his coffee mostly untouched. "Do what you need to with that information. I won't be joining her, obviously." After Ryan left, I remained at the coffee shop, examining the documents he'd provided. The evidence was damning, not just of fraud in obtaining the deed, but of a calculated long-term plan to take advantage of Grandma's age and trusting nature. My sister, whom I'd grown up with, shared holidays and secrets and childhood dreams with, had revealed herself to be someone I didn't recognize at all. That evening, I presented the new evidence to Marcus, who immediately recognized its value in accelerating our case. "This removes any possible claim of misunderstanding or good faith error," he noted, reviewing Jennifer's explicit text messages about waiting for medication to affect Grandma. The morning of Jennifer's planned move-in dawned with a crystalline winter clarity, the kind of bitter cold day where the air itself seems brittle enough to shatter. I'd been awake since 5 a.m., reviewing the final details of our strategic countermove with a strange calmness that belied the emotional storm beneath. Ryan's intel had given us the perfect opportunity to not only thwart Jennifer's plans, but to document her deliberate violation of the court order. I positioned my car on Oak Avenue, one street over from Grandma's house, with a clear view of the driveway through a gap between houses. Marcus had arranged for a process server and a county sheriff's deputy to be on standby, ready to respond as soon as I confirmed Jennifer's arrival. The temperature hovered just above freezing as I sipped coffee from a travel mug, watching my breath form clouds in the still morning air. At 8:17 a.m., exactly on schedule according to Ryan's information, a large rental truck turned onto Maple Street, followed by Jennifer's distinctive red Volkswagen. I sent a quick text to Marcus, "They're here," and settled in to observe. What happened next? The truck backed into the driveway with surprising precision, clearly not the driver's first moving job. Jennifer emerged from her car in a camel hair coat and impractical heeled boots, directing the two movers who jumped down from the truck cab. I watched as she approached the front door with confident strides, key in hand, only to falter when it failed to turn in the lock. Even from my vantage point, I could read the confusion and then fury in her body language. The way she tried the key repeatedly, then stepped back to examine the lock more closely, finally pulling out her phone to make what appeared to be an angry call. Given that Ryan had warned me about her plans, I suspected he was on the receiving end of that conversation, perhaps feigning ignorance about the changed locks. It was time. I started my car and drove the short distance around the block, pulling up to the curb just as Jennifer was instructing the movers to try the back door. The deputy and process server arrived simultaneously, their vehicles bracketing the moving truck in the driveway. "What's going on?" Jennifer demanded as I approached, her voice shrill with a mixture of anger and alarm. "Why are you here? And why is there a police car?" "I think you know exactly what's happening," I replied, maintaining a calm I didn't entirely feel. "You're attempting to violate a court order by moving into Grandma's house without permission." The deputy stepped forward, his expression professionally neutral. "Ms. Reynolds, I'm Deputy Garcia with the County Sheriff's Office. I need to confirm your identity." Jennifer's face flushed crimson, her eyes darting between the deputy, the process server, and me. "This is ridiculous. This is my house. I have the deed that was obtained through fraud and has been temporarily invalidated by Judge Harrison," I interrupted. "The same judge who issued an order explicitly prohibiting you from removing items from this property or attempting to take up residence here." The process server, a petite woman with a no-nonsense demeanor, stepped forward with a document folder. "Jennifer Reynolds, I'm serving you with papers documenting your violation of the existing court order and notifying you of the emergency hearing scheduled for Monday morning." Jennifer snatched the papers, her hands shaking with rage. "You set me up. You knew I was coming." "Yes," I acknowledged simply. "And now your deliberate attempt to violate a court order is officially documented, which will significantly strengthen our case for permanent invalidation of the fraudulent deed." The movers, witnessing this confrontation, had quietly retreated to their truck, clearly wanting no part in what had become a legal standoff. Jennifer noticed their withdrawal and snapped, "Don't you dare leave. We're still moving in." Deputy Garcia stepped between Jennifer and the truck. "Ma'am, I need to be very clear. If you attempt to enter this property today, you will be arrested for violating a court order. The movers will not be permitted to unload anything." The reality of her situation seemed to finally penetrate Jennifer's indignation. Her gaze shifted between the official vehicles, the retreating movers, and the legal papers in her hand. For a moment, I glimpsed something beneath her anger, a flicker of fear, perhaps even shame. before it was subsumed again by defensive rage. "This isn't over, Olivia," she hissed, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "You think you've won, but you have no idea what I'm capable of." "Actually, I think I'm beginning to understand exactly what you're capable of," I replied evenly. "And that's the most disappointing part of all this." She turned away without another word, stalking back to her car with rigid dignity, despite the defeat evident in every line of her body. The movers, looking relieved to escape the situation, quickly closed up their truck and departed with minimal paperwork. Within 10 minutes, the driveway stood empty again, as if the attempted invasion had never occurred. Deputy Garcia completed his incident report while the process server confirmed successful delivery of the court documents. "You might want to consider a restraining order," the deputy suggested as he prepared to leave. "Family disputes over property can escalate quickly." I thanked him for his advice, promising to discuss it with our attorney. As the official vehicles pulled away, I found myself alone in Grandma's driveway, overcome by a wave of exhaustion that had nothing to do with my early morning surveillance. The emotional toll of actively thwarting my own sister's plans, of documenting her duplicity for legal proceedings, settled over me like a physical weight. I used my key to enter the house, needing a moment to collect myself before calling Marcus with an update. Inside, the home felt unnaturally quiet, still bearing the wounds of Jennifer's earlier furniture removal, empty spaces where familiar pieces had stood, faint discolorations on walls where artwork had hung. I moved through the rooms slowly, cataloging what remained and what had been taken, adding to the inventory we'd been compiling for the court. In Grandma's bedroom, I paused at her dresser, now missing the silver brush set, but still holding framed photographs of family milestones. One in particular caught my eye. Jennifer and me at about 10 and 13, arms around each other's shoulders, gap-toothed grins directed at the camera during a summer vacation at Lake Michigan. We wore matching swimsuits with different colored stripes, our hair windblown from a day playing in the waves, faces sunburned despite Grandma's diligent application of sunscreen. I picked up the frame, studying our expressions, searching for some hint of the fracture that would eventually come. There was nothing to see, just two sisters, still innocent of the complexities of adult resentments, still capable of uncomplicated love for each other. The contrast between that captured moment and this morning's confrontation was so stark that my throat tightened painfully. My phone rang, startling me from this melancholy contemplation. It was Marcus, eager for an update on the morning's events. I provided a detailed account, including Jennifer's reaction, and the documentation secured by the deputy and process server. "This is excellent," Marcus said, satisfaction evident in his voice. "Judge Harrison already had concerns about your sister's credibility. This blatant attempt to circumvent her order will essentially cement our case. I'm confident Monday's hearing will result in a permanent invalidation of the fraudulent deed." "What about the restraining order the deputy suggested?" I asked, returning the photograph to its place on the dresser. "It's worth considering, especially given the escalation we've seen. Let me draft the paperwork this afternoon. We can file it first thing Monday before the hearing." After ending the call, I completed my inventory of the house, documenting missing items with methodical precision. The process felt important, almost ritualistic, naming each absence, acknowledging each violation before beginning the work of restoration. By early afternoon, I had a comprehensive list to add to our court documents and a renewed sense of purpose. I called Grandma next, knowing she would want an update, but hesitant to disturb her weekend with my parents. She answered on the second ring, her voice carrying the forced brightness she adopted when trying not to worry others. "Jennifer tried to move in this morning," I told her directly, knowing she preferred honesty to protective omissions. But we were prepared, thanks to Ryan's warning. She was served with additional papers and turned away by the sheriff's deputy. A long silence followed before Grandma responded, her voice smaller than I was accustomed to hearing. Did she say anything about why she's doing this? No, I answered gently. But Ryan provided evidence that makes her intentions very clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a momentary lapse in judgment, Grandma. It was a calculated plan. Another silence, this one heavy with the weight of painful realization. I keep thinking about all the times I excused her behavior, Grandma finally said. All the little dishonest moments that your grandfather and I dismissed as just Jennifer being Jennifer. The exaggerations that became outright lies. The borrowed items that were never returned. The promises broken without consequence. She sighed deeply. We should have been firmer when she was younger. Perhaps then. This isn't your fault, I interrupted, unwilling to let her shoulder blame for Jennifer's choices. We all make our own decisions as adults. Jennifer had the same upbringing, the same love and opportunities that I did, and she chose this path. I suppose that's true, Grandma conceded, though her tone suggested limited comfort in the observation. When will you know about the house? Monday. The emergency hearing is scheduled for 9 a.m. Marcus is confident the judge will permanently invalidate the fraudulent deed and restore your rightful ownership. Good. Her voice strengthened with resolve. And then I want to come home. This has been lovely, staying with your parents, but I need to be in my own space again. Are you sure? I asked, surprised by her readiness to return so soon after everything that had happened. The house still needs some work, replacing the furniture Jennifer took, fixing the damage from the hasty removal. Yes, I'm sure, she affirmed. I won't let her actions chase me from my home. We'll restore what needs restoring, replace what needs replacing. Together. By Sunday evening, my apartment had become command central for Operation Restoration, as I'd begun referring to our efforts to reclaim and rehabilitate Grandma's house. The dining table was covered with printouts, inventories of missing items, measurements for replacement furniture, contact information for specialty repair services that could address damage to antique pieces we'd recovered from Ryan's cousin's garage. Legal documents occupied one corner of the table, affidavits, court orders, the emergency hearing briefs Marcus had prepared, and Ryan's damning evidence of Jennifer's premeditation. I'd organized everything methodically, color-coded and tabbed, for easy reference during Monday's proceedings. The systematic approach helped maintain my emotional equilibrium in the face of what felt like a fundamental betrayal of family trust. When my doorbell rang at 7:30 p.m., I assumed it was the delivery of the takeout dinner I'd ordered, my refrigerator woefully empty after days focused on legal matters rather than personal necessities. Instead, I opened the door to find Ryan standing, awkwardly in the hallway, a cardboard box in his arms. I know I should have called first, he began apologetically, shifting the box to a more secure position. But I wasn't sure you'd agree to see me. I hesitated, uncertain about inviting him into my space given his relationship with Jennifer, strained though it now appeared to be. Reading my reluctance, he quickly added, I have more of your grandmother's things, items Jennifer had hidden, that weren't with the furniture we recovered. This unexpected development tipped the balance. I stepped back, gesturing him inside with cautious curiosity. You can put the box on the coffee table. Ryan entered with the careful movements of someone acutely aware they were navigating hostile territory. He placed the box down gently and stepped back, maintaining a respectful distance between us. These are things Jennifer kept separate from the furniture, he explained, gesturing to the box. Smaller valuables she thought might be easier to sell quickly if needed. I found them when I was moving my things out of our apartment yesterday. I approached the box warily, as if it might contain something dangerous rather than stolen heirlooms. Lifting the lid revealed a sad treasure trove. Grandma's jewelry box with its distinctive mother-of-pearl inlay, several small silver frames, containing vintage family photos, the delicate porcelain music box that had played Claire de Lune on countless childhood visits, and beneath these, carefully wrapped in dish towels, the hand-painted china teacups that had belonged to Grandma's mother. The sight of these precious items, casually appropriated and hidden away, renewed my anger in a visceral surge. "She had no right to take these," I said, my voice tight with controlled emotion. "Some of these pieces are over 100 years old. They're irreplaceable family history." "I know," Ryan replied, his expression genuinely remorseful. "I didn't realize what she was doing until it was too late. Or maybe I didn't want to see it." He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture of evident discomfort. "I keep thinking about your grandmother, how she always welcomed me into her home, made special desserts because she knew I liked them, asked about my work with genuine interest. And this is how Jennifer repaid that kindness." I carefully rewrapped the teacups, buying time to process this unexpected alliance with someone I'd previously viewed as complicit in Jennifer's schemes. "Why are you really here, Ryan? Beyond returning these items?" He met my gaze directly, his expression troubled but determined. "Two reasons. First, I wanted you to know I've given a sworn statement to your attorney about everything I witnessed. Jennifer's planning, her deliberate targeting of your grandmother when she was on medication, her discussion of selling the antiques for quick cash. I'll testify if needed. And the second reason?" Ryan shifted his weight uncomfortably. "To warn you, Jennifer's not stable right now. When I moved my things out yesterday, she was enraged, beyond anything I've seen from her before. She kept saying she wouldn't let you win, that you've always had everything while she struggled, that it was her turn to have something valuable." He paused, clearly struggling with sharing something so personal about someone he'd been close to. "She mentioned your grandmother's insurance policy, said something about how if she couldn't have the house, maybe nobody would." A cold dread settled in my stomach. "Are you saying she might try to damage the property?" "I don't know for certain," he admitted, "but I wouldn't put it past her current state of mind. She feels cornered and humiliated, especially after this morning's confrontation with the sheriff present." I absorbed this unsettling warning, mentally adjusting our security considerations for the property. "I'll talk to Marcus about additional protective measures. Thank you for the warning." Ryan nodded, then moved toward the door, his purpose apparently fulfilled. He paused with his hand on the doorknob. "There's one more thing you should know. The fraudulent deed? It wasn't Jennifer's idea initially. It was her friend Megan's, the one who works in real estate. Megan suggested it after hearing about the trust situation, even connected Jennifer with the notary who overlooked the signature verification. I'm not saying this to excuse what Jennifer did," he added hastily, "just to give you the complete picture." After Ryan left, I examined each recovered item carefully, photographing them for our documentation before setting them aside for return to Grandma's house. The revelation about Megan's involvement added yet another disturbing dimension to the situation. The suggestion that Jennifer had enablers who encouraged and facilitated her fraudulent actions. I made a note to have Marcus investigate this connection further, particularly the notary who had improperly certified the documents. Ryan's warning about potential property damage demanded immediate attention. I called Marcus despite the late hour, outlining the new concerns. He agreed to arrange for a private security service to monitor the property overnight and throughout the next day until the hearing concluded, an added expense that seemed prudent given the escalating stakes. "I'll add the security costs to our petition for damages," Marcus assured me. "Given what we now know about your sister's state of mind, the judge will likely be sympathetic to these preventative measures." Sleep eluded me that night, my thoughts circling between gratitude for the recovered heirlooms, anxiety about the hearing, and a persistent sadness about the irreparable damage to my relationship with Jennifer. The sister I'd grown up with seemed to have vanished, replaced by someone whose actions I could barely comprehend, let alone forgive. I found myself returning to the photograph I'd seen at Grandma's house, those two sunburned girls with their arms around each other, wondering at the mysterious alchemy that had transformed sisterly competition into something so much darker and more destructive. Monday morning arrived with a sense of finality, the culmination of weeks of legal maneuvering and emotional turmoil. I dressed with particular care, selecting a conservative navy suit that projected exactly the image I wanted the judge to see: responsible, professional, trustworthy. The antithesis of Jennifer's deceptive manipulations. I met Marcus at the EI courthouse 30 minutes before the scheduled hearing, reviewing our documentation one final time and discussing strategy. Judge Harrison has already reviewed the new evidence and incident reports, he informed me as we waited outside the courtroom. Her clerk indicated she's particularly interested in the text messages showing premeditation. What about Jennifer? Has she engaged new counsel? Her previous attorney had withdrawn from the case after the extent of the fraud became clear, unwilling to continue representing a client who had misled him about the circumstances of the deed transfer. She's listed as representing herself today, Marcus replied, his expression suggesting this was not a wise legal strategy. Given the strength of our evidence, that decision may actually work in our favor. The courtroom doors opened precisely at 8:45 a.m., allowing parties for the morning calendar to enter and settle before proceedings began. Jennifer was already seated at the respondent's table, wearing a cream-colored dress that emphasized her youth and vulnerability, a calculated choice, I was certain. She avoided eye contact as Marcus and I took our places at the petitioner's table, her posture rigid with poorly concealed tension. Grandma had elected not to attend, preferring to wait at my parents' home for news of the outcome. I can't bear to see her like this, she'd confessed the previous evening. Defending actions that are indefensible. I'll only make things harder, for both of you if I'm there. Judge Harrison entered at precisely 9 a.m., her brisk efficiency setting the tone for what would be a remarkably straightforward proceeding. After confirming that all parties were present and reviewing the case summary, she addressed Jennifer directly. Ms. Reynolds, I've reviewed the extensive documentation regarding your acquisition of the property in question, including evidence that you deliberately misrepresented documents to your grandmother while she was under the influence of medication, subsequently removed valuable items from the premises without authorization, and most recently attempted to take possession of the property in direct violation of this court's order. Do you wish to make a statement before I rule on the petition to permanently invalidate the deed transfer? Jennifer rose slowly, her composure visibly fragile. Yes, Your Honor. I believe there's been a misrepresentation of my intentions in this matter. My grandmother and I had discussions about my future use of the property that weren't formalized in writing. The transfer was meant to simplify the eventual inheritance process and reduce tax implications. Her voice gained confidence as she continued, falling into what seemed like a prepared speech. As for the removal of items, I was simply safeguarding family heirlooms during my grandmother's hospital stay, with the intention of returning them once she was well enough to care for them properly. Judge Harrison's expression remained impassive throughout this explanation, betraying neither belief nor skepticism. When Jennifer concluded, the judge glanced down at the documents before her, then looked up with penetrating directness. And your attempt to move into the property this weekend, despite a clear court order prohibiting such action? How do you explain that decision, Ms. Reynolds? Jennifer faltered momentarily before recovering. I misunderstood the scope of the order, Your Honor. I believed it only prevented selling or further removing items, not occupying the property itself. Despite the order specifically stating, and I quote, "Respondent is prohibited from removing additional items from or taking up residence in the property pending final determination of ownership?" Judge Harrison's tone conveyed polite incredulity. I may have misread that section, Jennifer admitted, her confident facade cracking. Visibly, Judge Harrison nodded, as if this confirmed something she had already concluded. Ms. Reynolds, this court takes a very dim view of fraudulent property transfers, particularly those targeting elderly individuals. The evidence presented demonstrates a deliberate, calculated effort to deceive your grandmother and acquire valuable property through misrepresentation. She shuffled her papers decisively. I am ruling in favor of the petitioner. The deed transfer dated November 12th is hereby permanently invalidated due to fraud in its execution. Ownership of the property at 427 Maple Street is restored to Eleanor Reynolds immediately. Relief washed over me in a physical wave, so powerful I gripped the edge of the table to maintain my composure. Judge Harrison continued, addressing additional matters with the same efficient clarity. Furthermore, I am ordering a full accounting and return of all items removed from the property to be completed within 7 days. Failure to comply will result in contempt charges. I am also granting the requested restraining order, prohibiting Jennifer Reynolds from approaching within 500 feet of both the property and Eleanor Reynolds for a period of 6 months. She fixed Jennifer with a stern gaze. This court takes elder exploitation very seriously, Ms. Reynolds. You should consider yourself fortunate that your grandmother has not pursued criminal charges at this time. Jennifer remained frozen. In place, the implications of the ruling visibly sinking in as Judge Harrison concluded the hearing with final instructions to Marcus regarding the filing of restored deed documentation. Only when the judge exited the courtroom did Jennifer's composure finally shatter completely, her face crumpling with a mixture of fury and despair. I felt a momentary impulse to offer comfort, a reflexive response to the sister I had known rather than the woman who now stood before me. But the memory of Grandma's hurt expression when she realized Jennifer's deception hardened my resolve. Some betrayals cut too deeply for easy reconciliation. Outside the courthouse, Marcus shook my hand with genuine warmth. A complete victory, he confirmed. The house is officially your grandmother's again, protected by both the restored deed and the restraining order against further interference. Thank you for everything, I said, meaning it with a depth of gratitude that transcended the professional relationship. I couldn't have navigated this without your guidance. Family property disputes are unfortunately common, he replied, but few are resolved so definitively in favor of the rightful owner. Your grandmother is fortunate to have such a determined advocate. As Marcus departed to file the final paperwork, I paused on the courthouse steps, allowing myself a moment to absorb the significance of what we'd accomplished. The winter sun had broken through morning clouds, casting a pale gold light across the judicial building's limestone facade. In that moment of unexpected beauty, I felt something shift within me. Not happiness exactly, but a certain resolution, a sense of justice restored, even as family bonds remained fractured. My phone vibrated with an incoming call from Grandma, eagerly awaiting news of the hearing's outcome. It's over, I told her, my voice steadier than I had expected it to be. The judge ruled completely in our favor. The house is yours again, legally and officially. Oh, thank goodness, she breathed, relief evident in every syllable. And Jennifer? How did she take it? I hesitated, reluctant to burden Grandma with the full extent of Jennifer's reaction. As well as could be expected, the judge granted the restraining order, so she won't be able to approach the house or contact you directly for at least 6 months. A heavy silence followed, laden with the unspoken acknowledgement that our family had been irrevocably altered. When can I come? Home? Grandma finally asked, her voice small but determined. Tomorrow, if you'd like. I'll spend today making sure everything's secure and comfortable for your return. I paused, uncertain how to broach the next subject. Ryan returned more of your personal items last night. The jewelry box, the music box, the china teacups. They're safe. That's something at least, she sighed. Though I worry more about what's been lost that can't be measured in possessions. As I ended the call, promising to update her throughout the day, I spotted Jennifer emerging from the courthouse, her earlier vulnerability replaced by a rigid anger visible in her posture and expression. When she saw me standing on the steps, she stopped momentarily, our gazes locking across the distance. In that suspended moment, I searched for some remnant of the sister I had known. The girl who had shared my childhood, who had cried on my shoulder after her first heartbreak, who had danced with me in Grandma's kitchen to old vinyl records on rainy afternoons. I found nothing familiar in the cold hostility of her stare. Without a word, she turned and walked away, each step a deliberate rejection of reconciliation. I watched until she disappeared around the corner, then turned in the opposite direction, toward the practical tasks of restoration that awaited. The house that had nearly torn our family apart now required healing of its own. Locks to be reinforced, spaces to be reclaimed, emptiness to be filled with recovered treasures and new beginnings. The victory felt hollow in some ways, shadowed by the loss of a relationship I had once thought unbreakable despite its complications. Yet as I drove toward Grandma's house, her house secured now against further threat, I recognized that sometimes justice and healing require difficult choices. Protection of the vulnerable may come at the cost of relationships that prove themselves unworthy of preservation. Tomorrow, Grandma would return home, to rooms that held 50 years of memories with Grandpa, to the garden she had tended through decades of changing seasons, to the kitchen where she had taught two little girls to bake cookies and measure flour with precise hands. The legal battle was over, the property secured, but the work of emotional recovery was just beginning. For Grandma, for me, perhaps someday even for Jennifer, though that path would be entirely hers to choose. For now, it was enough to know that keys would turn in locks that recognized their rightful owner, that valuable legacy would remain in deserving hands, that manipulation and deception had failed to overcome truth and careful documentation. The deeper lessons about family, trust, and the sometimes painful necessity of establishing boundaries would unfold gradually, in their own time, through the days and months ahead. 6 weeks after the courthouse victory, a tentative normalcy had begun to establish itself in Grandma Eleanor's home. The missing furniture had been either recovered or replaced, walls repainted to cover the ghostly rectangles left by removed artwork, and new security measures installed throughout the property. Grandma had settled back into her routines with remarkable resilience, tending to her houseplants, resuming her book club meetings in the freshly restored living room, and planning her spring garden with meticulous attention to detail. I had established a new pattern as well, visiting 3 times a week instead of my previous once-weekly dinners. Tuesday evenings for shared meals and classic movie nights, Saturday mornings for grocery shopping and errand running, and Sunday afternoons for simply being present, often working quietly on my laptop while Grandma knitted or read nearby. The restraining order against Jennifer remained in effect, providing a legal buffer that allowed healing to begin without the immediate threat of further confrontation. On this particular Sunday afternoon in mid-March, unusual warmth had prompted us to abandon our indoor pursuits for Grandma's back patio. She sat in her favorite wicker chair, sorting through seed catalogs and making notes for her vegetable garden, while I reviewed client portfolios on my tablet, occasionally looking up to admire the early crocuses pushing through the soil in neat borders along the garden path. "I think I'll try those purple bush beans this year," Grandma announced, holding up a catalog page for my inspection. "They're supposed to be quite prolific, and the color would be lovely for pickling." "They look beautiful," I agreed, setting aside my work to give her my full attention. These ordinary moments had taken on a precious quality since the turmoil of January, each one a quiet victory of normalcy reclaimed. Grandma studied her notes with a contemplative expression. "Your grandfather always said a garden should balance practicality with joy, growing what nourishes the body alongside what delights the eye." She smiled at the memory. He built that trellis specifically for my moonflowers, even though they serve no purpose beyond beauty. "I remember helping him stain it," I said, surprised by the clarity of the recollection. "I was about 9 and he let me use a real brush, not just the little foam ones from children's craft kits." I felt so important. He said you had a steadier hand than most adults he knew, Grandma replied, her eyes crinkling with the memory. Even then, you were methodical, careful with details. The conversation lapsed into comfortable silence, broken only by the rustle of catalog pages turning and the distant chime of wind bells hanging from the maple tree at the property's edge. These peaceful interludes had become increasingly frequent as the immediate crisis receded, allowing space for both reflection and forward movement. The sudden harsh ring of the doorbell shattered our tranquility, causing us both to start. Unexpected visitors had become rare since the property dispute, most friends and family now calling before arriving. A reflexive anxiety tightened my shoulders as I rose to answer the door. "I'll get it," I told Grandma, trying to keep my tone, casual despite the instinctive wariness that had developed since Jennifer's deceptions. "Probably just a package delivery." I moved through the house with purposeful strides, checking the newly installed security camera feed on my phone before reaching the front door. The porch was occupied not by a delivery person or unexpected relative, but by a professionally dressed woman I didn't recognize, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing an identification badge on a lanyard. Opening the door cautiously, I maintained my position in the doorway, neither inviting entry nor appearing outright hostile. "Can I help you?" "Good afternoon," the woman began with practiced cordiality. "My name is Diana Mercer from the Department of Elder Services. I'm looking for Eleanor Reynolds." She presented her official identification, which confirmed her position with the county agency responsible for investigating elder welfare concerns. My mind raced through possible explanations for this unexpected visit. "May I ask what this is?" "Regarding, Mrs. Reynolds is my grandmother and I help manage her affairs." Diana maintained her professional demeanor, though I detected a subtle shift in her assessment of the situation. "We've received a report expressing concern about Mrs. Reynolds' living conditions and possible financial exploitation. It's standard procedure for us to follow up with an in-person wellness check." The implication was clear and infuriating. Someone, almost certainly Jennifer, had reported Grandma as a victim of elder abuse, likely suggesting that I was the perpetrator. The irony would have been laughable if it weren't so potentially damaging. "I understand," I replied, keeping my voice steady despite my internal turmoil. "My grandmother is currently enjoying the garden. Would you like to speak with her directly?" "Yes, that would be appropriate," Diana confirmed, making a brief notation in her portfolio. I led her through the house, mentally cataloging the evidence of Grandma's well-maintained living conditions. The spotless kitchen with adaptive tools that accommodated her mild arthritis, the clearly marked medication organizer on the counter, the emergency contact list prominently displayed beside the telephone, the absence of any hazards that might cause falls or confusion. Grandma looked up from her catalogs as we stepped onto the patio, her expression shifting from peaceful contentment to wary curiosity at the sight of our visitor. "Hello there," she greeted, setting aside her materials and straightening in her chair. "Grandma, this is Diana Mercer from the Department of Elder Services," I explained, keeping my tone neutral. "She's here to check on your welfare based on a report they received." Understanding dawned immediately in Grandma's eyes, her considerable intelligence quickly connecting the likely source of this welfare check to recent events. "I see," she said crisply. "Another of Jennifer's tactics, I presume." Diana neither confirmed nor denied this assumption, maintaining professional objectivity. "Mrs. Reynolds, I'd like to speak with you privately if that's all right. It's standard procedure in these situations." "Of course," Grandma agreed readily. "Olivia, would you mind making some tea while Ms. Mercer and I chat? The jasmine green." "Would be lovely." I recognized the request as Grandma's way of giving me a productive task while allowing her the privacy to handle this situation with the directness that characterized her approach to challenges. "Certainly. Take your time." In the kitchen, I methodically prepared the tea service, Grandma's ornate silver teapot that had been among the recovered items from Ryan's cousin's garage, delicate porcelain cups with hand-painted violets, the small matching sugar bowl and creamer. The familiar ritual helped calm my simmering anger at Jennifer's latest attempt to disrupt Grandma's peace. Through the kitchen window, I could observe without hearing their conversation. Grandma's posture remained dignified and composed as she spoke at length, occasionally gesturing toward the house or garden. Diana took notes periodically, her expression professional but increasingly relaxed as the conversation progressed. At one point, Grandma rose and led Diana to the garden shed, presumably to show her something relevant to their discussion. By the time I carried the tea tray onto the patio, their conversation had clearly shifted from formal assessment to more general discussion. Grandma was showing Diana photographs on her phone, likely documentation from the property dispute, and court resolution. "The tea looks wonderful," Grandma said as I arranged the service on the small table between the patio chairs. "Ms. Mercer has been most understanding about our recent family difficulties." Diana accepted a cup with a polite nod. "Your grandmother has been very forthcoming about the property dispute and the court's findings of attempted fraud. She's also shown me the security improvements made to the home and explained your regular visitation schedule." "I believe in transparency," I replied carefully, "especially regarding Grandma's well-being and security. I've explained that Olivia has been my protector throughout this ordeal," Grandma added, her voice firm with conviction. "Without her intervention, I would have lost my home to deception. The court records confirm everything we've told you." Diana sipped her tea before responding. "Based on our conversation and my observations today, I see no concerns regarding Mrs. Reynolds' welfare or living conditions. Quite the contrary. The support systems in place appear robust and appropriate." She directed her next comment to Grandma. "I would like to provide some information about additional senior services available in the county, if you're interested. Transportation assistance, social programs, that sort of thing." "That would be lovely," Grandma replied graciously. "Though, I'm still quite capable of driving myself during daylight hours, and I have a wonderful network of friends and family." The conversation shifted to more general topics: community resources, Grandma's involvement in her book club and garden society, her upcoming plans to host a small gathering of friends for her birthday in April. Throughout this discussion, I observed Diana making mental notes, clearly assessing Grandma's cognitive function and social engagement as part of her evaluation. When Diana finally departed after nearly an hour, she left behind several informational brochures and her business card. "Please don't hesitate to contact me if you have any questions or concerns," she told Grandma at the door. "Or if you encounter any further family complications." The unspoken understanding passed between them. Diana had clearly recognized the spurious nature of the report that brought her to our door and was offering her professional support should similar tactics continue. After she left, Grandma and I returned to the patio, both needing a moment to process this latest development. The peaceful afternoon had been irrevocably disrupted, a reminder that the aftermath of Jennifer's actions continued to ripple outward in unexpected ways. "I'm sorry about that," I said finally, helping Grandma settle back into her chair. "I should have anticipated Jennifer might try something like this." "It's not your responsibility to predict her next move," Grandma replied, firmly. "And in some ways, this visit may have been beneficial. Having an official record of my well-being and living conditions could prove useful if Jennifer attempts further interference." Her practical perspective, as always, helped reframe the situation constructively. "What did you show her in the garden? Shed?" I asked, curious about that particular interaction I'd observed from the kitchen. Grandma smiled with slight mischief. "The new organization system you installed for my gardening tools, the labeled shelves, the adaptive handles on my favorite implements, the safety features. I wanted her to see concrete evidence of how you've been helping me maintain independence while providing support." Clever, I acknowledged, appreciating her strategic thinking. I also showed her the court documents on my phone, the restraining order, the invalidated deed, the judge's findings about the fraud attempt. I wanted to establish a clear record of who actually tried to exploit me. Grandma's expression hardened momentarily. I love Jennifer, but I won't allow her to twist reality and cast you as the villain in this situation. The remainder of the afternoon passed quietly, though the earlier serenity had been replaced by a more vigilant calm. As evening approached, I prepared a simple dinner while Grandma rested in her favorite armchair, the emotional toll of the unexpected investigation evident in her slightly drawn features. Over chicken soup and fresh bread, Grandma finally addressed the deeper implications of the day's events. "I keep wondering where I went wrong with Jennifer," she said softly, breaking the comfortable silence we'd maintained through most of the meal. "What did I do differently in raising her that led to such different values?" "You didn't do anything wrong," I assured her, reaching across the table to cover her hand with mine. "You gave us both the same love, the same opportunities, the same moral guidance. We simply made different choices with what we were given." "Perhaps," she conceded, though doubt lingered in her eyes. "But I can't help feeling there must have been signs I missed, moments when intervention might have set her on a different path." This was a conversation we'd circled several times since the property dispute began. Grandma's persistent search for explanation, for some parental failure that might account for Jennifer's choices. I understood the impulse. It was easier to believe in a mistake that could have been corrected than to accept that some people simply choose deception when it serves their purposes. "The psychologist I've been talking to has an interesting perspective on this," I offered carefully, referring to the therapist I'd begun seeing to process my own complicated feelings about Jennifer's betrayal. "She says that sometimes family members develop different moral frameworks not because of different parenting, but because they learn different lessons from the same experiences." Grandma considered this thoughtfully. "What kinds of different lessons?" "Well, when you and Grandpa praised Jennifer's charm and social skills, I learned that you valued those qualities. But Jennifer might have learned that charm could be used to get what she wanted without having to work as hard as I did with my academics and career focus." I paused, trying to articulate a complex concept without vilifying my sister entirely. It doesn't mean she was destined to make unethical choices, just that she developed different strategies for moving through the world. And those strategies proved problematic when combined with financial pressure and opportunity, Grandma finished, grasping the concept immediately. "Exactly. The psychologist calls it divergent moral development. Same foundation, different constructions built upon it." Grandma nodded slowly, absorbing this perspective. "It helps to have a framework for understanding, even if it doesn't excuse the behavior." She sighed deeply, the weight of family fracture evident in her slumped shoulders. "I still hold hope that someday reconciliation might be possible." "I know," I said gently, though I remained far less optimistic on that front. The depth of Jennifer's deception and her continued attempts to create problems, like today's Elder Services investigation, suggested a level of hostility that transcended typical sibling rivalry or temporary anger. After dinner, I insisted on handling cleanup while Grandma rested in the living room with her knitting. A cardigan for my mother's birthday, its intricate cable pattern requiring concentration that would provide welcome distraction from the day's stress. As I loaded the dishwasher, my phone chimed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "Hope you enjoyed your visitor today. Remember, I told you this isn't over. You've taken everything from me, my home, my relationship, my reputation. Don't think I'll just disappear." The message carried no signature, but Jennifer's voice was unmistakable in every bitter word. The reference to her home still reflected her warped perspective on Grandma's property, while the mention of her relationship suggested she blamed me for Ryan's departure rather than her own deceptive actions. Most concerning was the ominous tone of the final sentence. not a threat explicit enough to violate the restraining order, but clearly intended to create anxiety about future actions. I debated how to respond, or whether to respond at all. Engaging might escalate the situation, while ignoring the message might suggest vulnerability. After careful consideration, I composed a brief, factual reply. This message appears to violate the spirit, if not the letter, of the current restraining order. I've documented it accordingly. Any further communication will be forwarded to the authorities and our attorney. After sending the message, I blocked the number, though I harbored no illusions that this would prevent Jennifer from finding alternative means of contact if she remained determined to continue the conflict. I made a screenshot of the exchange and emailed it to Marcus, adding it to our growing documentation of Jennifer's concerning behavior. I debated whether to share this latest development with Grandma, weighing the importance of transparency against the desire to protect her from additional stress. Before I could decide, my deliberation was interrupted by a knock at the back door, a rhythmic pattern that identified the visitor as Mrs. Abernathy before I even reached the door. The elderly neighbor stood on the back step, clutching a tin of homemade cookies, her expression concerned beneath her usual friendly smile. "I hope I'm not interrupting your evening," she began. "But I wanted to check that everything was all right after that official visitor today. The county car in the driveway had me worried." "Everything's fine, Mrs. Abernathy," I reassured her, stepping back to invite her inside. "Just a routine welfare check that was prompted by someone with an agenda. The caseworker found no concerns whatsoever." Relief smoothed the worry lines on Mrs. Abernathy's face. "Oh, that's good to hear. I told Harold. That's my husband." I said, "Harold, there couldn't possibly be anything wrong at Eleanor's house. That granddaughter of hers is there all the time making sure everything's just so." She offered the cookie tin with a conspiratorial smile. "I brought these as an excuse to check on you both, but since everything's fine, they can just be cookies." Grandma appeared in the kitchen doorway, her face brightening at the sight of her longtime friend. "Margaret, what a lovely surprise. Come sit with me in the living room. Olivia was just about to make a pot of decaf coffee that would go perfectly with whatever you've brought in that tin." I recognized the gentle command embedded in Grandma's statement and moved to prepare coffee while the two women settled in the living room, their comfortable chatter a soothing counterpoint to the day's tensions. Mrs. Abernathy had been Grandma's neighbor for over 30 years, their friendship spanning births, deaths, illnesses, and celebrations. She had been a steadfast supporter throughout the property dispute, even providing a sworn statement about Jennifer's moving truck for the court case. As I arranged coffee cups and small plates on a tray, I overheard fragments of their conversation, drifting from the living room, concerns about the church fundraiser committee's new chairperson, updates on Mrs. Abernathy's granddaughter's college applications, speculation about when the community garden plots would be dry enough for spring tilling. The utter normalcy of their discussion provided a reassuring reminder that life continued beyond family drama, that community connections remained solid despite personal upheavals. When I joined them with the coffee service, their conversation shifted to include me naturally, without the awkward pauses that sometimes occurred with other visitors, uncertain how to address the family conflict everyone knew about, but few mentioned directly. "Olivia, Margaret was just telling me about a home security presentation at the senior center next week," Grandma explained. "Perhaps we should attend together. It might offer some additional ideas for the property." Mrs. Abernathy nodded enthusiastically. "The police department is sending their community outreach officer, that nice young man who helped organize the Neighborhood Watch program last summer. They're covering everything from digital security to physical locks, even landscaping choices that discourage trespassing." The suggestion was practical and timely, given both the earlier Elder Services visit and Jennifer's ominous text message. "That sounds worthwhile," I agreed. "When is it scheduled?" As they discussed logistics, I found myself appreciating anew the resilient support network that surrounded Grandma. Friends like Mrs. Abernathy, who offered both companionship and practical assistance. Community resources designed to enhance senior independence and security. And family members, the non-predatory ones, who maintained regular, meaningful involvement in her life. This network, more than any legal document or court order, represented the true protection against exploitation and isolation. The evening progressed with gentle conversation and shared memories, Mrs. Abernathy's presence providing a welcome buffer against dwelling too extensively on the day's disruptions. When she departed shortly after 9, promising to collect Grandma, for their regular Tuesday bridge game, the house felt warmer somehow, more firmly anchored in normalcy despite the undercurrents of ongoing family tension. As I prepared to leave for my own apartment, Grandma handed me a small package wrapped in tissue paper. "I've been meaning to give you this," she said, an uncharacteristic hesitation in her voice. "It belonged to your grandfather, and I think he would want you to have it now." Carefully unwrapping the tissue revealed Grandpa's pocket watch, the antique gold timepiece he had carried every day of his adult life, wound each morning with ritual precision. Its familiar weight in my palm evoked vivid memories of watching him check the time, his movements deliberate and certain, the soft click of the case opening and closing a reassuring constant throughout my childhood. "Grandma, I can't take this," I protested gently. "It's too valuable, not just monetarily, but sentimentally. You should keep it here with you." She closed my fingers around the watch with gentle firmness. "I want you to have it now, while I can see you enjoy it. Besides," she added with a small smile, "I've been thinking about what truly matters in terms of legacy and inheritance. It isn't houses or furniture or even pocket watches. It's the values and memories we pass along. You've demonstrated that. You understand what this house truly represents, not just property to be acquired, but history to be honored and preserved." The significance of her words wasn't lost on me. In choosing to give me this treasured heirloom now, Grandma was making a statement about trust and appreciation that stood in stark contrast to Jennifer's attempted appropriation of property. One approach honored relationship and shared values. The other treated legacy as mere commodity to be seized. "I'll treasure it," I promised, carefully placing the watch in my bag. "And I'll bring it when I visit, so you can see it being used and appreciated." Grandma nodded, satisfaction evident in her expression. "That's exactly what your grandfather would have wanted, for his possessions to remain connected to family meaning, not just locked away as collectibles." As I drove home through the quiet suburban streets, Grandpa's pocket watch resting securely in my bag, I reflected on the day's contradictions. The Elder Services investigation juxtaposed against Grandma's evident well-being, Jennifer's bitter text message alongside Mrs. Abernathy's supportive visit, the ongoing tension of familial rupture contrasted with the strengthening of other meaningful connections. The situation remained far from resolved. Jennifer's message suggested she harbored plans for continued disruption, while Grandma's hope for eventual reconciliation seemed increasingly unrealistic given the depth of deception and ongoing hostility. Yet within this complicated reality, small moments of grace emerged. Grandma's resilience, community support, the transfer of meaningful legacy through thoughtful gifts rather than grasping appropriation. Back at my apartment, I placed Grandpa's pocket watch on my bedside table, its soft ticking a comforting reminder of continuity amid change. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, documenting Jennifer's message for legal purposes, reinforcing security measures, continuing the process of healing from betrayal while remaining vigilant against further manipulation. But tonight, the weight of Grandma's trust and the evidence of our unbroken bond, despite Jennifer's attempts to drive wedges between us, provided a measure of peace that transcended the day's difficulties. Some relationships, I was learning, proved their worth precisely when tested by adversity. The bonds that truly mattered weren't those claimed through legal documents or assertions of entitlement, but those demonstrated through consistent care, mutual respect, and shared values. In that fundamental truth lay both consolation for what had been lost and foundation for what remained to be built. The anonymous email arrived on a stormy Tuesday morning in April. Its subject line innocuous, enough that it escaped my spam filter. Important information regarding 427 Maple Street. I almost deleted it without reading, assuming it was a real estate solicitation, one of dozens that had targeted Grandma's neighborhood as property values continued to rise. Something made me pause and open it instead, a decision that would dramatically alter the course of events over the coming weeks. You should know that Jennifer Reynolds has been seen repeatedly driving past the property at night. Last Saturday, she parked down the street for over an hour, watching the house. This isn't the first time. I'm concerned about what she might be planning. Just thought someone should be aware. The message bore no signature, no identifying information, and originated from an encrypted email service that provided anonymity to its users. My first instinct was skepticism. It could easily be a malicious attempt to create anxiety or discord. Yet the specificity of the details and the measured tone suggested genuine concern rather than manipulation. I forwarded the message to Marcus with a brief note requesting his thoughts, then continued with my morning routine, trying not to allow this new uncertainty to consume my focus. By the time I arrived at my office, Marcus had responded with characteristic pragmatism. Anonymous tips are always tricky, but given the history, this warrants attention. The described behavior, if accurate, technically violates the restraining order. I suggest enhancing security monitoring temporarily while we assess credibility. Would you like me to contact the sheriff's department on your grandmother's behalf? I considered his question carefully. Involving law enforcement based solely on an anonymous email seemed premature, potentially escalating tensions unnecessarily. Yet, dismissing the warning entirely felt equally irresponsible given Jennifer's increasingly erratic behavior over the past months. Let's enhance security first, I replied. I've been considering upgrading Grandma's system anyway. This provides added incentive. I'll talk to the security company about adding cameras with better night vision and motion-triggered recording. By mid-afternoon, I had arranged for the security upgrades, scheduling installation for the following day. I decided not to mention the anonymous email to Grandma immediately, reluctant to introduce new anxiety when she had been making such excellent progress in reclaiming her sense of security and peace. When I arrived for our regular Tuesday dinner, I found Grandma sorting through old photographs in the living room, cardboard boxes opened around her like the petals of an elaborate flower. Black and white images lay in careful arrangements on every surface, organized by decade and family connection in a system comprehensible only to her. I've been meaning to tackle this project for ages, she explained as I kissed her cheek in greeting. These should really be properly archived and labeled before my memory starts getting fuzzy about who's who in the older ones. I settled beside her on the sofa, picking up a faded photograph of a young couple standing proudly beside a 1940s automobile. Are these your parents? Yes, just after they bought their first car, she confirmed, her fingertip gently tracing the image of her mother's smiling face. Dad saved for 3 years to afford it. They were so proud. It represented everything. They'd worked for as young immigrants building a new life. We spent a pleasant hour organizing photographs into acid-free albums, Grandma providing rich context for each image. Family stories I'd heard before but now appreciated with new understanding, recognizing them as the precious legacy they truly were. The historical chronology created a welcome diversion from my concerns about the anonymous email, allowing me to be fully present in this meaningful activity. It wasn't until after dinner, as we washed dishes together in companionable rhythm, that Grandma broached the subject of Jennifer unexpectedly. I saw her yesterday, she said without preamble, handing me a plate to dry. Jennifer, I mean. My hands stilled momentarily before resuming their motion with the dish towel. Where? Did she approach you? No, nothing like that. I was at Henderson's Garden Center picking up tomato starts, and she was in the perennial section with a friend. She didn't see me. Grandma's tone remained measured. though I detected an undercurrent of sadness. I left without making my purchases. Didn't want to create an awkward situation for either of us. The timing of this sighting, so soon after the anonymous email warning, sent a chill of apprehension through me. "That must have been difficult," I offered carefully, seeing her unexpectedly. "It was," Grandma acknowledged, her hands moving, mechanically through the soapy water, but also illuminating in a way. Watching her laugh with her friend, selecting plants as if nothing had happened, as if she hadn't tried to take my home through deception. It confirmed something I've been struggling to accept. I waited, giving her space to continue in her own time, recognizing the weight of whatever realization she was preparing to share. The granddaughter I thought I knew doesn't exist anymore, perhaps never did. Her voice remained steady, though her eyes revealed the cost of this conclusion. The Jennifer I loved and trusted was partly my own creation, built from wishful thinking and selective attention. I chose to see her best qualities while ignoring concerning patterns that had been present for years. This stark assessment surprised me, coming from Grandma who had consistently maintained hope for eventual reconciliation, despite all evidence suggesting its impossibility. "What made you realize this now?" She rinsed the last glass carefully before answering. It was her expression, completely unburdened by any remorse or concern about what she'd done to me, to our family. If I had seen any hint of regret or internal struggle, I might still believe the Jennifer I thought I knew was in there somewhere, temporarily overshadowed by greed or poor judgment. But there was nothing, just ordinary enjoyment of an ordinary day, as if the court case, the fraud attempt, all of it had been a minor inconvenience rather than a profound betrayal. I dried the glass slowly, searching for an appropriate response to this painful epiphany. "I'm sorry, Grandma. I know you've held on to hope for healing between you. Hope is important," she replied, draining the sink and wiping her hands on her apron. "But at some point, hope without evidence becomes delusion. I'm too old to waste whatever time I have left on delusions, however comforting they might be." Her pragmatic acceptance, free from dramatic self-pity or bitter anger, exemplified the resilience that had guided her through 90 years of life's challenges. I followed her into the living room, where we returned to photograph sorting with renewed purpose, the shared activity providing comfort amid difficult realizations. I waited until we had completed 2 more albums before mentioning the security upgrades, framing them as routine improvements rather than response to potential threats. The technology has advanced significantly since the initial installation. The new cameras have much better resolution and night vision capabilities. Grandma nodded thoughtfully. "That seems sensible. After yesterday, I'm more convinced than ever that maintaining appropriate boundaries is necessary, not just legally, but physically as well." By the time I left that evening, we had made significant progress on the photo archiving project and finalized arrangements for the security installation. I hadn't mentioned the anonymous email, a decision that felt increasingly uncomfortable as I drove home through neighborhoods that transitioned from Grandma's established suburb to my urban apartment complex. The secrecy, however well-intentioned, created an echo of Jennifer's deception that sat uneasily with my commitment to transparency. The security company arrived promptly at 9 the following morning. I had taken the day off work to oversee the installation, using the opportunity to catch up on client correspondence from Grandma's sunny kitchen table, while technicians mounted cameras at strategic points around the property. The comprehensive system would provide continuous monitoring with alerts sent directly to both my phone and Grandma's, as well as the security company's monitoring center. As the lead technician demonstrated the new mobile application that would allow us to view camera feeds remotely, my phone rang with an unfamiliar local number. Stepping onto the back patio for privacy, I answered cautiously. "Olivia Reynolds?" a formal male voice inquired. "Yes, speaking. This is Detective Mahoney with the County Sheriff's Department." I'm following up on a report we received regarding your sister, Jennifer Reynolds, potentially violating a restraining order. My breath caught briefly. What report? I haven't filed anything recently. The detective's tone remained professional, but took on a note of confusion. We received information from a Marcus Chen yesterday afternoon, indicating that Jennifer Reynolds had been observed surveilling the property at 427 Maple Street in violation of an active restraining order. He identified himself as the attorney, representing Eleanor Reynolds, the property owner. Surprise and frustration surged simultaneously. Marcus had proceeded with contacting law enforcement despite my preference to enhance security measures first. I see. Mr. Chen is indeed my grandmother's attorney, but I wasn't aware he had filed a formal report. May I ask what information was provided? The report included an anonymous tip about Ms. Reynolds repeatedly driving past the property and conducting stationary surveillance, along with background on the previous property dispute and fraud attempt. Given the history and existing restraining order, we're obligated to investigate. I closed my eyes briefly, centering myself before responding. I understand. What does the investigation involve? We'll attempt to verify the reported behavior through any available evidence and speak with Ms. Reynolds directly about the allegations. I wanted to contact you first, since you've been the primary liaison regarding your grandmother's legal matters. His tone suggested professional courtesy rather than suspicion. Have you observed any concerning behavior yourself? No, I answered truthfully. I received the same anonymous tip that was apparently forwarded to you, but I haven't personally witnessed anything that would constitute a violation of the restraining order. We spoke for several more minutes, the detective gathering additional context about the ongoing situation while explaining the parameters of their investigation. After ending the call, I immediately contacted Marcus, my frustration evident despite efforts to maintain professional composure. You filed a report with the sheriff's department without consulting me first, I stated directly when he answered. I did, he acknowledged without defensiveness. After reviewing the specific details in the anonymous email and consulting with a colleague who specializes in stalking cases, I determined that immediate documentation with law enforcement was the prudent course of action. We agreed to enhance security first while assessing credibility, I reminded him, pacing the length of Grandma's patio. No, you expressed your preference for that approach, which I respected by not pressing the issue at that time. However, my professional obligation extends beyond implementing only the steps you're comfortable with. If Jennifer is indeed conducting surveillance as described, it establishes a pattern that could potentially escalate to more serious violations. His reasoning was sound from a legal perspective, yet I couldn't shake my concern about potential repercussions. And if the anonymous tip proves false or unprovable, we'll have escalated tensions unnecessarily. If it proves false, the investigation concludes without action. If it proves unprovable but accurate, we've still established an official record of concern that strengthens our position should more verifiable violations occur later. Marcus's voice softened slightly. Olivia, I understand your reluctance to further antagonize your sister. That's natural and commendable in many ways. But my primary responsibility is ensuring your grandmother's safety and legal protection. The conversation continued with Marcus explaining his decision-making process in greater detail, acknowledging my concerns while gently but firmly defending his professional judgment. By the end of our discussion, my frustration had largely dissipated, replaced by grudging recognition that his approach, while more aggressive than I would have chosen, served Grandma's best interests from a legal security perspective. The remainder of the day passed without incident, the security installation completed efficiently by mid-afternoon. I demonstrated the new system to Grandma, who adapted quickly to the technology, despite her initial concerns about becoming one of those paranoid old ladies surrounded by cameras. Her practical nature recognized the value of enhanced visibility and documentation, particularly given her recent realization about Jennifer's true character. Better to see trouble coming Then be surprised by it, she observed pragmatically as we tested the motion detection alerts in the backyard. Though I still think the garden gnome camera holder is a bit much. I laughed at her wry assessment of the decorative housing the technicians had suggested for the back garden camera. It is rather twee, but it blends with your existing garden. Decor better than a stark industrial mount would have? I suppose, she conceded with an exaggerated sigh. At least it's not one of those ghastly flamingos Martha across the street insists on displaying. This moment of ordinary banter felt precious amid the ongoing tensions, a reminder that daily life continued with its small pleasures and petty annoyances, despite extraordinary circumstances. We spent the remainder of the afternoon reviewing the security protocols until Grandma declared herself thoroughly sick of technology and suggested a walk to the neighborhood bakery instead. The following morning brought unexpected developments that rapidly escalated the situation beyond our careful preparations. I was just settling into my office for a client meeting when my phone vibrated with an incoming call from Detective Mahoney. "Ms. Reynolds, I wanted to update you on our investigation," he began without preamble. "We conducted an interview with your sister yesterday evening regarding the alleged restraining order violations." "I appreciate the follow-up," I replied, signaling my assistant to reschedule my impending meeting. "What was the outcome?" "The interview was contentious," he said diplomatically. Ms. Reynolds denied the allegations vehemently and became increasingly agitated during questioning. She made several concerning statements about your grandmother's property that suggest ongoing fixation despite the court's rulings. A knot of anxiety tightened in my stomach. "What kind of statements?" She repeatedly referred to the house as rightfully mine and expressed conviction that she had been robbed of her inheritance through manipulation. The detective's professional tone couldn't quite mask his concern. More troubling was her assertion that things will eventually be set right through what she called inevitable justice. "That sounds vaguely threatening," I observed, my mind already calculating potential implications and responses. "We assessed it similarly, which is why I'm contacting you now. While the statements don't constitute specific enough threats to warrant immediate intervention, they do suggest a concerning mindset. Combined with the alleged surveillance behavior, there's sufficient reason for heightened vigilance." I thanked the detective for his candor, appreciating the unofficial warning embedded in his official update. After ending the call, I sat motionless at my desk for several minutes, processing this new information and its implications. Jennifer's statements to law enforcement revealed a perspective even more distorted than I had realized. Not merely resentment about the thwarted fraud attempt, but a persistent belief that Grandma's house rightfully belonged to her despite all legal evidence to the contrary. Such fixed delusions rarely dissipated without intervention, and Jennifer had steadfastly refused the family's suggestions of therapy following the court case. Her increasingly rigid perspective, combined with the apparent surveillance behavior, created a concerning trajectory that required immediate attention. I called Grandma, who answered on the third ring, slightly breathless from what sounded like physical activity. "Everything okay?" I asked immediately, tension sharpening my tone. "Perfectly fine," she assured me, "just repotting some herbs on the back patio. These new clay pots are heavier than they look." Relief at her ordinary activity momentarily overshadowed my purpose in calling. "Don't strain yourself with the heavy lifting. I can help with that this weekend." "I'm 84, not incapacitated," she replied with mock indignation. "But I suspect you didn't call mid-workday to discuss my gardening activities. What's happened?" I explained Detective Mahoney's call and Jennifer's concerning statements, as gently as possible, emphasizing the precautionary nature of the warning while acknowledging the potential seriousness of the situation. Grandma listened without interruption, her silence on the other end of the line stretching several seconds after I finished speaking. When she finally responded, her voice carried a weariness that transcended physical fatigue. "So it continues," she said simply. "What does Marcus recommend?" "I haven't spoken with him yet, but based on our previous discussions, he'll likely suggest documenting everything meticulously while maintaining the enhanced security measures we've already implemented." I hesitated before adding, "He might also recommend considering a temporary relocation, just until we can better assess Jennifer's intentions." "Absolutely not," Grandma replied with sudden vehemence. "I will not be driven from my home by threats and intimidation, however veiled they might be. I lived through the Depression, wartime rationing, and 60 years of marriage to a wonderful but occasionally maddening man. I can certainly handle my granddaughter's misguided fixation." Her resolute stance came as no surprise, though it complicated our security planning considerably. "I understand and respect your position, Grandma. Perhaps we can discuss some middle ground measures when I come over tonight." We agreed on dinner plans, and I promised to consult with Marcus before arriving. The remainder of my workday passed in a blur of client meetings and financial analyses, my professional focus repeatedly interrupted by concerns about Grandma's safety and Jennifer's apparent escalation. By the time I arrived at Maple Street, that evening, spring twilight was settling over the neighborhood, painting the old houses in gentle lavender hues that belied the tension underlying my visit. Grandma greeted me with her customary warmth, though I noted new lines of strain around her eyes, suggesting the day's revelations had affected her more deeply than our phone conversation had revealed. Over homemade beef stew and sourdough bread, we discussed practical security measures that wouldn't disrupt Grandma's independence, establishing a daily check-in system with neighbors, scheduling regular visits from friends and family to ensure she was rarely alone for extended periods, creating emergency protocols for various scenarios. Marcus had provided additional suggestions during our afternoon consultation, including documentation strategies and communication guidelines for potential encounters with Jennifer. "I feel like we're preparing for a natural disaster," Grandma observed as we reviewed the comprehensive plans. "All this for my own granddaughter." The sadness in her voice cut through my carefully maintained professional demeanor. "I know this is painful, Grandma. None of this is what any of us would have chosen." She nodded, absently folding her napkin into precise quarters. "The hardest part is recognizing that the Jennifer I thought I knew, the little girl who sat on my lap for stories, who helped me bake cookies every Christmas, who cried in my arms when her first serious boyfriend broke her heart, that person is gone, if she ever truly existed at all." No response seemed adequate to this profound grief, so I simply reached across the table and covered her hand with mine, offering silent support for the loss that transcended physical absence. As we cleared the dinner dishes, the security system chimed with a motion detection alert from the front yard. We both tensed momentarily before checking the mobile application, which revealed nothing more threatening than the neighbor's cat strolling across Grandma's front lawn. The false alarm nevertheless highlighted the heightened vigilance that had become our new normal. "Maybe I should stay tonight," I suggested as darkness settled more completely outside. "Just as an extra precaution." Grandma shook her head firmly. "Absolutely not. I refuse to disrupt your life because of vague threats that may come to nothing. The security system works perfectly. I have the emergency buttons in every room, and the neighbors are all on alert. I've survived alone for 12 years since your grandfather passed. I'm not about to start needing a nighttime guardian now." Her determined independence both impressed and frustrated me. "At least let me stay until you're settled for the night." This compromise she accepted, and we spent the evening in companionable activity, completing another photo album, discussing plans for summer garden planting, watching an episode of her favorite British mystery series. The ordinary routine provided comfort amid extraordinary circumstances, a reminder that normal life continued despite the shadows at its edges. When I finally departed around 10, Grandma stood in the doorway watching until I reached my car, her small figure illuminated by the porch light, hand raised in farewell, a gesture she had performed throughout my life, from childhood departures to adult goodbyes. The familiarity of it caught in my throat, a poignant reminder of all that Jennifer had willingly sacrificed in her pursuit of material gain. As I drove home through quiet neighborhoods, past houses where families lived their private dramas behind, lit windows and closed doors, I reflected on the mysterious alchemy that transforms shared DNA and common upbringing into such divergent human beings. Jennifer and I had grown from the same family tree, nourished by the same love, guided by the same examples, yet had become fundamentally different people making irreconcilable choices. The answers to such profound questions remained elusive, but one truth emerged with increasing clarity. Family connection, while biologically immutable, required reciprocal nurturing to thrive as a meaningful bond. Without mutual respect, shared values, and fundamental trust, the connection became merely technical rather than emotionally substantive. A painful reality Grandma was finally beginning to accept. Tomorrow would bring new challenges in this ongoing situation, legal consultations, security monitoring, emotional processing of painful revelations. Yet tonight, driving through the quiet city with Grandpa's pocket watch ticking softly in my bag, I found unexpected peace in acknowledging what could and couldn't be controlled, what could and couldn't be saved, what was worth fighting for, and what required the courage to release. Whatever Jennifer's inevitable justice might entail, we would face it with the same strength and dignity that had guided us through every previous challenge. Not alone, but surrounded by the genuine connections that remained unbroken despite her determined efforts to fracture them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.